Welcome all listeners and watchers to LifeShot Health and Wellness. Again, we got Dr. Ian Tennant with us. Dr. Ian, how are you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm pleased to be outside. It's so still here in Peterborough. I don't know if it's the same with you in Ely, but we've got really kind of mild, still weather. There's a little bit of a breeze, so I thought I'd sit outside today because it's so sunny and practice what I preach. I don't know if you can see.
Hey.
Can you see? Yeah,
Got
can
the
you
bare
see?
feet,
I've got the bare feet on the patio.
Very nice.
It's a stone patio and the sun's shining. So even though we're in the middle of the winter, climate change is maybe helping us a little bit here, because I don't have to be wrapped up with a woolly hat and scarf, but it feels good. Feels good anyway.
It's quite true. I was out this morning doing some breathing exercises, and I was on the floor, but my feet weren't cold. My hands got cold. But I think it was about 2 degrees, but because of the ambient temperature is really quite nice. So yeah, I encourage people to get out there, especially today. I've told my kids, have you guys been outside today? And they haven't been outside. I'm like, get outside. Have you seen how amazing it is?
It's beautiful, really beautiful. So did you have a good Christmas, Clint?
Yeah, very good Christmas. And yourself?
Yeah, really nice, actually, very nice.
Yeah.
Good mix of family and friends and eating and drinking and being merry. So yeah, all good.
I did pretty well. So I didn't overeat like I normally do, which is, I suppose, is the new habits which I've adopted since becoming a health coach. Is not, it's honoring fullness and hunger. So when you get to that 75% or 80% fullness mark, just say, "Well, I'm done now," instead of going over the mark. I don't always achieve it, but it's something that is starting to become a habit where I would finish eating before I'm totally stuffed.
Yeah, because there's that little lag period, isn't there? Kind of 20 minutes where the body kind of catches up and starts to digest, and then the blood, all the signals enter the blood for sugar and fat, and we kind of get that feeling of satiety. And if we don't wait for that to kick in, then it's easy to overeat. And I do it as well, especially when the food tastes so good. But the other side of it, even if we do overeat, then it's kind of getting used to what fasting feels like and getting used to developing that confidence that if we had a nice feast, then balance that out with a good fast and not being afraid of missing a few meals afterwards and still being able to perform at a really high level without a few meals. So it's great. I mean, we're in this world, aren't we? So we're kind of practicing what we preach, and it's quite easy for us to adopt these new habits. But it's such a shame that the information isn't out there. For people who are struggling with their health or struggling with their weight or whatever.
Well, today's going to be an exciting program. We're talking about ecosystems and how they affect your health. And we will be talking about gut ecology, which is an interesting one, seeing that we've just stuffed ourselves for Christmas. And our stomachs are probably crying out, "Okay, give me a break," or something like that, or give me something a little bit lighter, or whatever it may be. So why don't we dive into this week? This is week number 6, and the topic is called "How Ecosystems Affect Your Health." And this is the end of our Get Healthy series, in conjunction with promoting the book by Dr. Ian Tennant called "Restoring Balance." So it's how to return to a natural state of health. Is that what the subtitle is?
Natural state of easy health. So, I really believe that health should be, or being healthy and the state of well-being should be easy. So yeah, that word, with the editor put that word "easy" in there because she felt it was important for us to understand that it shouldn't be a chore to be healthy, to live healthily. It should be something that can feel easy once it becomes a good habit. So yeah.
Great stuff. So let's wrap it up this week with kind of drawing it all together in the different topics that we've had. And for the listeners who haven't heard obviously sessions 1 to 5, you can find it on any podcast app, including the Podbean where we're live right now. And also you can find it on the clintgrove.com website /podcast. You just go there and you'll listen to all the podcasts. So, Ian, let's start off today then with how are we going to draw this all together?
Yeah, so this session really, it's a bit of a self-indulgence for me because I'm really geeky about environmental issues and the soil ecology. And for some people, the wider environment, our planet, may seem a far too distant issue to worry about when it comes to our own personal health. The first 5 sessions that we've done together have been on kind of commonly known healthy lifestyle habits, so diet, exercise, good quality sleep, fasting, changing levels of light and artificial light, and all those types of things, mental and emotional health. Whereas what I truly believe is we can only be as healthy as the planet we live on. So if you think of a goldfish bowl, for example, if you've got a little pet Nemo in your house, and you might give him a lovely space to swim around, him or her, lovely little space to swim around so it can exercise well, lots of interesting ornaments and plants. Really, you buy the best quality goldfish food available, but if the water's polluted, then eventually that fish is going to suffer. Or if there's something wrong with the microbes in the gravel at the bottom, then the levels of nitrates or whatever in the water will build up, and that fish will suffer. And it's the same for our planet, really. We can only be as healthy as the air we breathe, the water we drink, the plants that we eat. So that's what today's session is about. It's really to kind of challenge, if there's some health geeks out there like myself and you, then we treat our body as a temple. But today, what I really want to do is to challenge the idea of where that temple starts and finishes. So is it just where my skin ends? And that's what we're going to talk about with the bacteria and microbes. A temple is a building, really, or it can be considered as a place of home. But we've got the house we live in, and we've also got planet home. Our wider home is planet home and the ecosystem. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Focus on microbes because they're kind of a common interface between all these different communities that we live in and all these different levels of home that we live in. We have microbes all over our body, not just in our gut. These microbes carry out all the magic. Really, they do the biology and do all the chemical reactions that kind of transform something like food, which we consider, a stick of celery. I look at a stick of celery and think that's not me, but the bacteria help to compass that celery down, and then so that I can absorb it. And the bacteria in the soil help celery to be strong. And eventually part of that celery will come into my body and it will become me. So these microbes and these bacteria and fungi, and they do all the magic transformation work for allowing something that's not me to become me, and vice versa. That's what it's all about.
Sounds I love that idea, because I never often thought of it. I can't speak for all of humanity, but if you think about the fact that we grow into an adult body from an infant, or at least from that first initial what do they call it, a baby before
embryo, fetus.
The embryo, yeah, the fetus. And it grows and it's consuming food basically the whole life, and it just grows from what it consumes. So our makeup is grown from what we consume. And you put a banana in, and the banana becomes you at some point.
That's it. Yeah. And if it's a contaminated banana, or a banana that's full of pesticides and herbicides, then they come into you. And it's well established now that you can take the blood from an umbilical cord of a growing fetus. You just talked about a baby that's growing, and you can find traces of man-made chemicals in that umbilical cord, in the blood. In that. So it used to be thought that there was some kind of barrier, selective barrier between the mother and the baby, but now it's known that you can find all these kind of flame retardants, pesticides, all of these traces can be found in the umbilical cord that is going into the baby. So absolutely, as you said, what we eat ends up inside us. I wanted to really start with our gut, really, if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
So as I mentioned, our gut is a place where the composting process takes place. We start that off by chewing and releasing saliva and all our digestive enzymes, but it's really the bugs in our gut and the microbes. It's not just bacteria. There's all kinds of other microbes that we're still yet discovering and understanding, and they're living in a community, and they're like they all have different roles, and they're not just breaking our food down into smaller pieces so that we can digest it. They're actually manufacturing vitamins for us as well, and they're also helping us. They're modulating our immune system, and they're controlling how much neurochemicals we produce as well. So it's known that 90% of the neurotransmitter serotonin, which we need to feel in a good mood, is manufactured in the gut, and then it's transported up into the brain. And the types of bacteria in our gut that are present will change the amount of serotonin that's produced, so change how we feel, our mood. So we need. I think it was you and I have talked about Stephen Gundry, his latest book, which is the is it the gut paradox, or it's the I think it's the gut paradox. Yeah, he calls them our gut buddies, and I think that's how we have to think of these teams of microbes living in us and around us, and as we'll go on to talk about in our soil, as our buddies. Really, they're part of our team, part of our community.
I think it's called the plant paradox.
Sorry, that he's released one since then.
Okay.
Yeah, the plant paradox was his first one. There's another one since then that's not. It might have been taken off his website. I looked recently, but it's. If I find it, I'll let you know.
Yeah.
It's not as popular as the plant paradox, but longevity paradox. Sorry, longevity paradox, but it's largely about gut bacteria.
Okay.
Yeah, longevity paradox. That's the one. So yeah, these we have to look after these gut buddies. They're active. They're not just breaking down our food; they're producing our food, and they influence all kinds of disease. They've been linked to different heart disease, cancer. And if anyone is into fermented foods, I know you've talked about fermented foods in the past. What sort of fermented foods have you tried?
Sauerkraut, or made whey. I mean, I would ferment the grains, so soaking whole wheat overnight. Different types of grains.
Yeah. So these, traditionally, we had more bugs in our diet before we had all these sterilization, pasteurization, so many pesticides and herbicides, which some of them have got antimicrobial activities as well. Our diet was more rich in bacteria and fermented foods. So there's different ways. If you were to make sauerkraut yourself, people can buy a starter culture which may have maybe 10 different strains of bacteria, or buy a sourdough starter culture. But the other way is to get those bugs from your environment. So if you've got some organically grown cabbage, hasn't been sprayed with all sorts of chemicals, then you should in principle have a nice healthy mix of bugs on those leaves of the cabbage, which after you've chopped it up and sprinkled it with salt and left it in a jar, those bacteria will begin the fermentation process. So you don't need to add any starter culture in, and they then go through a process, kind of evolution themselves. You'll start off with some bugs that start to break down the cell walls of the cabbage, and then others will come in and start to do the lactic fermentation. So you get a rise of lactic acid, and that kind of pickles and preserves the cabbage, and that will provide you, when you eat it, with a very different mix of bacteria than you get if you just eat fresh cabbage, because it's gone through this like evolution process.
So just at this point, Ian, when I eat these certain foods and I'm eating healthy foods, it's not always immediately obvious to your body. For example, I bought some activated charcoal supplement the other day, and they asked me to give a review on this activated charcoal, and I'm like, well, I've been taking it, but I don't necessarily feel the immediate effects or like any kind of high. And I suppose throughout in this whole process of aging well and doing good for our body, we don't immediately feel like, you can start to feel good over time and more energized if you start to really be aware of your body, but you don't always feel this rush or this high as such. So how do we deal with that? Because we want to look after these guys in our stomach, and they're doing a great job for us. But how do we get to that point where we switch over and say, you know what, I'm going to feed it the good stuff because I know the benefits of that?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think with and we do have to be careful as well, because it's not like we should just go out and start shoving sauerkraut and kefir and all these fermented foods down us in every single meal, because it might be too much of a change for your gut. Sometimes you have to do these things gradually. But the best approach I've come across is what's his surname? His book, I think it's Michael Rusico, and his book is called Healthy Guts, Healthy You. And he says that there's not actually a one size fits all for everyone. So I don't know if you've heard of this condition called small intestine bacterial overgrowth, or SIBO.
No.
SIBO for sure, SIBO. And that's when people have they have a bacterial overgrowth in their upper intestine, and the bacteria produce too much gas, and then that leads to all these, really unpleasant bloating. In that circumstance, you wouldn't want to be shoving loads of more fermented foods and probiotics into you, because it may be overloading the system. For them, it may be a matter of like wiping the slate clean, not necessarily taking antibiotics, but some laying off all the fermentable foods, taking some antimicrobial, licorice or other antimicrobial herbs, and kind of having a little bit of a reset, and then gradually, once the guts calm down, then introducing these compounds. But you do I hear what you're saying about the charcoal. It's hard to know. There's so many products out there, and it's hard sometimes to figure out what's good and what's bad. Activated charcoal, I believe there is evidence that can help. It can help with detoxification for sure. I haven't looked into how activated charcoal helps with our gut bacteria. Was that what you were looking at it as a prebiotic?
Because it's a part of a detoxification, part of a cleanse process.
And were you eating it on an empty stomach?
I was doing it before a meal, but what's quite confusing is that the actual instructions on the actual box, or the where the tablets are, is about eating it after a meal.
Right.
So it is confusing as to when to have it. But yeah,
my opinion. Yeah, my opinion. And I went. There's a guy called Dr. Brian Walsh, and he's created an excellent detoxification training program. And I went on one of his functional medicine weekends, and he recommends taking charcoal or chitosan on an empty stomach, because what you really want to, if you're using it as a detox aid, then what we're really wanting it to do is to cling on to chemicals that our body is releasing through the gut. So you don't want to, some people use charcoal after a meal, I think, to help with gas and or indigestion. I haven't really looked into that, but from a detox point of view, you want to put it on my understanding is you want to eat it on an empty stomach, so that it's sucking, it's drawing in like a sponge the toxic substances that we're releasing from our bloodstream via our gut out into through our stool. So it's a binder in that sense. And if you mix it with food or straight after food, then there's a chance that it'll just stick to all the food you've eaten, if that makes sense, rather than the toxins you're trying to.
And that's what I've heard the same thing. So yeah, I'd probably, for our listeners, recommend having it on an empty stomach, just based on my understanding and Ian's understanding. So if you want our advice, not that I'm a doctor myself, but I'd say have it on an empty stomach. Sure.
And I think what I tend to do is have it with those activated charcoal. I don't use it all the time, but if I am having a bit of a cleanse, then first thing in the morning with plain water, still water, and then that's before a few hours before eating anything, and that seems to work. But it is hard to tell with these. It's kind of like the marginal gains idea, isn't it? That all these little things, we can't expect wonders from every single intervention. Otherwise, we'd probably explode with, ecstasy if we were doing all these different interventions. But I think it's a matter of the marginal gains and being consistent these things over time.
Yeah.
So that we were talking about bugs, weren't we? So hopefully that's given our listeners an idea that bugs are not just these, they're active, they're doing lots of different jobs for us, they're controlling our mood and making nutrients for us. So vitamin B12 is made by bacteria, for example, and that's why a lot of people think that you're best to get vitamin B12 from animal products, and that's probably because animals have a lot more vitamin B12 producing bugs in their gut, if they're grazing outdoors or whatever. It does also grow on bacteria that are present on plants as well. So if you're eating kind of plants that have that are not too sterilized and washed and all of that, then I'm sure you're going to get some B12 on that from plant sources.
So should we switch over to in the soil now? You talk about the microbes and the quality of our food. I mean, you touched on it already, but maybe you just want to go into that a little bit deeper.
Yeah. So again, I can get really geeky about soil, and it's one of the things I want my career to sort of work towards long term, is helping regenerate soils. And the reason for that is that the more I learn about soils, the more fascinated I become with them. My girlfriend Kim often asks, how can we make soil sexy? Because I can get a bit technical about it, and she gets, she's so enthused and animated. So that's the challenge, really. How can we make soil sexy? But I think it's when you learn about what goes on in soil, how it's just teeming full of all these millions of different life forms. It's not just bacteria, there's fungus, and intricate, it's like a city. A teaspoon of soil is like a city. There's billions and billions of different organisms. They're all healthy. Soil has this kind of internet, World Wide Web internet of fungal broadband fibers that communicate from one plant to another. It's been shown that these fungal mycorrhizae can shuttle nutrients from one root to another. It's part of the communication process between plants. I've sent if people don't believe this, then I've sent a link to a paper for you that's on PubMed. Just one paper which explains a little bit about these mycorrhizae. So they help plants become stronger, more resilient, help them absorb nutrients from the soil. But the thing is, if we're pouring chemicals, antimicrobial chemicals, onto our soil in the name of increasing yields of crops and to reduce pests, we're also damaging the microbial flora. And together with intensive digging and over farming the soils, that's losing that structure. So we're getting weaker plants that need more herbicides and pesticides to stay alive, and we're ending up with a weaker, more contaminated product in our shops, and which, as we just discussed, it gets into our body, gets into our they're developing children in the mother's womb. So the soil can be sexy, but we're kind of ruining it a little bit with modern farming processes.
Yeah, so we've known about it for a while, but we just haven't really always connected the dots, I think, as humanity, as it becomes more and more increasingly a problem, and more voices start to speak out against it, because I think in some countries it's worse than others, right? In America, it's probably been the worst.
Yeah.
But I was just thinking back to those people who go to Israel, I think it is, and then take those mud baths. And I think, that's just a sign to say, what's inside of that mud is really beneficial to the body. At the same time, we don't make a strong enough link in ourselves to be convicted enough between the link between that food that's in the ground, that's growing for us, and in that soil, and what that plant actually absorbs out of that soil, and then eventually ends up inside of us. If we start to make that link strong and start to be really convicted about it, as a human force, we can start to change things. That's what we really should be doing.
That's it. And it's, exactly. And it's about education and awareness, and all these no one can keep up with the amount of chemicals that we find in our environment. There's thousands added to the worldwide chemical database each week, thousands of new man-made chemicals. Got a few stats here. I think there's over 140,000 man-made chemicals for sale, industrially for sale, wow, which is a lot. And that's not total chemicals, that's just industrially available, and that was in 2012. 4.9 million deaths per year are attributed to, this is from the World Health Organization, attributed to environmental chemicals. $209 billion is estimated as the disease burden by endocrine disrupting chemicals. So these are chemicals that interfere with our hormone balance. So $209 billion per year is, and we just have to think about the types of diseases that are affected by hormone imbalances. So we've talked in previous episodes about, cancers that have got a hormone influenced by hormone levels, fertility levels, the cost of helping people become fertile and conceive is rising. So when you kind of dig into the research a little bit, it's not, when we go into a supermarket, we're not going to have on all these products, they're not going to list all of the trace chemicals that are sprayed onto these crops, or that just find their way into the fields from from nearby factories or other processes. No one's going to list all those. No one's going to, test for them. Our water companies are only really testing for the most well-known harmful chemicals. They're not able to study every single, pesticide and herbicide that's run into our waterways, and drugs that have, when people take antibiotics or other chemicals and they pee them out, that's going straight into our waterways as well. So our water companies are not able to keep up with all of this, and that's the scary thing. So and not wanting to get too pessimistic, but as you said, we have to raise awareness of this, and hopefully at the end of this talk we'll talk about the best things that we can do to take action on it.
Yeah. So does that flow straight into this glyphosate study?
Yes. Yeah. So a lot of people will have heard of glyphosate, or Roundup, as it's well known as. Now, I always feel a little bit. No, I don't feel sorry for the companies that. The company that produced this used to be Monsanto, and now it's Bayer. It's a little bit like McDonald's and Coca-Cola. The biggest companies always get the most rap. It's not the only chemical, but it's a well-studied chemical. It's the most, it's the most used herbicide in the world. And originally it was thought that glyphosate only killed broadleaf plants. It's like a herbicide. It's quite selective, but now it's known that it's very promiscuous in its action. It does more than just kills plants. It has antimicrobial effects. So in the soil, it kills bacteria. It even apparently affects the behavior of earthworms as well. So it doesn't just have one effect. So we can't think, okay, spray this crop with spray this field with herbicide and it will get rid of the plants, and that's all it's doing. It's now known that it does lots of different things.
Which is quite misleading, because I remember putting it on my lawn and saying, it doesn't do anything to the lawn, it just kills the weeds. And I'm thinking, is this some kind of magic? You can't. It's like they're trying to say something which we know can't be true intuitively, because there's no ways it's not going to affect the grass in a negative way.
No, exactly. Sometimes things are selective, but more often than not, they have lots of different effects. And Roundup is one of those things that does have lots of different effects. It's been classified in 2015. It was classified by, again, the World Health Organization as a probable carcinogen in humans, so a cancer-causing agent. Probable, not definite, but probable. And the other thing that I find most scary about glyphosate is that it's the way that it exerts its effect as a herbicide is that it blocks the plant's ability to synthesize amino acids. So it stops the plant growing, basically, and then the plant gets stressed and it matures super early and then it dies. Now, that's good for weeds, but it's also sprayed liberally onto crops such as oats and wheat when they want to encourage that crop to ripen very quickly. And it's used in that sense as they call it a drying agent. So let's say oats, your favourite porridge, Scottish oats grown in Scotland, they the farmer thinks, right, I plan to do my harvest the middle of August. The weather looks dry next week. The weather forecast looks pretty good. I'm going to make the most of this and harvest all my oats before it gets rainy. So they spray it with glyphosate. That stresses the oat plant. It dries, it matures quicker, dries out. It's effectively dying quicker, maturing quicker, because it's got this amino acids pathway blocked. So the plant thinks, right, let's get this over and done with. I'm going to mature and dry out. And so it's sprayed on, not just as a herbicide, it's sprayed as a drying agent on lots of grains. So, every time if we're eating non-organic oats or wheat, it's likely, or there's a chance that it's been sprayed with glyphosate, and that glyphosate has been attributed to cases of celiac disease. So people who are maybe susceptible have got weakened guts. This is just adding another stress. It's affecting the gut bacteria in your gut because it's got this antimicrobial activity. So yeah, it's a bit of a mess, really. But that was just one example I wanted to throw in there, because it's something which probably all of us, these types of grains are something that we are all buy in the shops, and it's something very real out there.
It's scary because I got 4 kids, and I am concerned about their health, and they do like their sweets and cakes, but at the same time, for bigger families, the cost of living is quite high.
Yeah.
So, you got to earn some decent amount of money to buy the right types of foods. For example, organic oats or whatever it may be. And those things are slightly more expensive, and I can understand, because the farming process might be more expensive to produce crops that are organic, and hopefully, fingers crossed, that they're not pulling any fast tricks and actually are supplying organic food. I mean, we just have to take their word for it, which is a little bit scary as well.
Yeah, it is. I mean, there are cases, reported cases of some supermarkets supplying stuff that's labelled organic, and it's been found out that the farmers, the growers, have supplied them with non-organic stuff. So it does go on, but we do have to trust to a certain extent, and not, just think we can do the best we can. There are other things, people propose you can, if you're worried specifically about glyphosate, you can supplement with glycine, which will outcompete glyphosate in the gut and in the body, and help your body rid itself of glyphosate. So there are strategies we can use to. I haven't tried that one myself, haven't looked into it thoroughly, but part of our ongoing education of ourselves is to kind of be aware of this and keep doing the best we can. And you're absolutely right, if cost is an issue, then it's about making the best choice you can with the money available, rather than worrying. It's not like these things are going to kill us all overnight.
One of our listeners said, go keto and grow your own microgreens.
Yeah, that's an option. Get some really good, organic seeds and grow them on your windowsill. Then that they're not going to be sprayed. The seeds may have traces of something on them, but you're not going to certainly know if they're on your windowsill. Then they're not getting sprayed by anything. So good suggestion. Who was that?
On the way. So we don't know her real name, but he or she looks like the Pink Panther.
Good suggestion. On the way. Thank you.
So we're gonna go on to ecosystem services now. I'd like to, before I think we're doing good on time, but we want to make sure we get to the Earth as a system, the Gaia, and then so why don't we jump onto ecosystems right now?
Yeah. So what hopefully the message we've got across so far is that there's communities around us. So we've got communities of bacteria in our guts, communities in our soil of microbes, and they are carrying out a service for us. In a previous episode, we talked about mitochondria, which it's thought eons ago, these mitochondria were bacteria outside of us, bacteria like single cell organisms outside of us. And now they have cooperated with us, they live inside us, and they produce a service for us. But can we think about bacteria and other ecosystems, so our trees, our forests, the waterways, as services for us humans, and can we value them? And indeed, there are some environmentalists and biologists who are trying to calculate the value that these services that are provided by our ecosystems. Tony Juniper is one of them. He's got an excellent book called What Has Nature Ever Done for Us, and How Money Really Does Grow on Trees is his book. And he says, he's really future forecasting what the cost of our environment, what it will cost us if we don't protect our environment. So if all the trees are gone, for example, or if all the soils are blown away because we've overfarmed them, how much it will cost us in real monetary terms to do these services ourselves. So, through geoengineering, or you just have to think about we've talked about soils. It's estimated in the UK 10 billion tons of carbon is stored in the soils. A single hectare of soil has the potential to store and filter enough water for 1,000 people. So the environment is doing a lot of hard work for us. And if we destroy it even more than we're doing already, then it's going to cost us through engineering and technology to, do these things that the environment is already doing for us.
Yeah.
So that was just a thought to throw in there, really.
Well, it almost seems like we want to do what we need to do right now in this generation without thinking about future generation and how that's going to affect them. So, because we're going to live to 100 years or so. So as long as we survive, then that's fine. But, I think it takes some kind of nobility or, just a sacrifice in a way to say, how can we improve the lives of those coming up before us? We need to think about that, because it is our children's children who's going to be growing up on this planet. And even though we can get by now without worrying too much about it, like, oh, what difference does it make? What does my little difference make to the entire globe? But actually, your small change, and everyone does a small change, can make a massive difference around the world.
Definitely, yeah. And it's all cumulative, isn't it? So just thinking about it, talking about it with people, it makes it more of a acceptable, less kind of hippie out there topic. And then people will, maybe come onto this, we can use our purchasing power, and then the companies and the governments or politicians will listen up, and then they start to respond when they know what we are really asking for and what we want for our future generages.
It comes down to money, though, a lot of the time, doesn't it? And it's understandable. We all have to live and eat, but if it all comes down to, well, I have to eat, then let's make sure that what we eat is good, and we can make those decisions by our buying power.
Yeah, and money can be good. Money really, at the end of the day, is just a means of exchange, and a means for assigning value and storing value and helping oil the cogs in our society. So if we, use money in a better way, then we can create change quickly. That's a whole different topic, but
sure. Let's jump on to the Gaia topic. I know there's there's kind of a word that's kind of, what is it? I wouldn't say religious, spiritual. Where does it come from? Is it like Eastern religion or something?
I think it came from the Gaia hypothesis. For the listeners, it's this idea that the Earth as a whole is like a giant organism. It's like a giant bacterial cell, really, and that all of the systems on planet Earth, so the air, the waters, and the soil, and the living organisms, they self-regulate each other in the same way that my digestive system and my blood system and my nervous system, they all cooperate and talk with each other and create this homeostasis in my body to keep my body temperature stable and my health stable. There's this idea that the Earth works in a very similar way. And Gaia, your question was where did the name came from? It was chosen, I believe, by a chemist called James Lovelock, And he was a chemist, and he was studying the atmospheres on different planets and studying the atmosphere on our planet and the way that light reflects through these atmospheres. And he came up with the idea that Earth's atmosphere is unique compared to other atmospheres in our solar system because, oxygen, our atmosphere is rich in oxygen. It shouldn't stay this way on its own. It's the living organisms that keep this oxygen at the certain level. It should combine with other gases and elements and reduce, whereas life on Earth keeps the conditions suitable for life. So life promotes more life, which kind of turns the idea on the head of, the part of the Darwinian idea of nature is red in tooth and claw, and, that's survival of the fittest. It's not all about competition and death.
It's more about cooperation, isn't it?
Cooperation, yeah, and feedback. So yeah, and can we be conscious participants in this, this this organism of Earth, and what role do we want to play?
It does remind me of Greg Braden, who talks about the cooperation of nature, and also there was I can't remember his name, who was on the London Reel, and he spoke about the cycles of death and life, and how death gives way to life, and the cycle continues. And so when you spoke about life giving rise to life, it's the same. It's essentially the same thing, where we have to honor that process of things dying in order to give rise to the next thing and to the next thing, and this self-perpetuating system that we live in, which is an amazing system, and we should all give thanks for it, really, for being on this wonderful planet, because we can't find anything else out there in the solar system right now, or in the universe that we can see that would sustain this. And so looking after it, I mean, I think we all have to have that heart to say, this is an amazing place, look at what it's doing for us and how it's, sustaining our lives, and honor it and cherish it with all that we have.
Absolutely incredible. Very well said. And that death part of the cycle, it sounds very morbid, but as we've just discussed, bacteria, we think of bacteria as the bad guys, really, don't we? Because we associate them with disease and death, and they are on if you're looking at the circle of life, they're on the decomposers. They help things decompose, along with worms and all these other detritivores that take living organisms and degrade them down. But as we've just discussed, they're also producing things. They're creating new life. They're creating nutrients and minerals, and they're active participants. So it's not really death at all, really. It's just as you said, a new cycle. So the more we can appreciate all of this and try and enhance those natural processes in a healthy way, I think is better. What can we do about it, though? It can sound very pessimistic and overwhelming, the state of the world, but I firmly believe that it's down to our imagination and purchasing power and the choices we make and the conversations we have that can bolster the health of our planet. And then we're bathed in our environment. So if we're bathed in a healthier environment, then we can stay healthier longer. So
one thing that comes to mind when you say that is that I think if we can look after ourselves first and almost put that oxygen mask on us first, as it were, before we put the oxygen mask on somebody else. Just thinking about that analogy, where if you look after yourself and make sure that you are in prime fitness, or at least energy levels are sufficient, then you would have space in your mind to start to think about something outside of yourself. So in order to help this planet, in order to be charged and to have energy to go and sort other problems out outside of yourself, I think it'd be a good place to start, is to get this body in a place that is feeling okay and not feeling down. And the mood is like you spoke about these gut bacteria helping your mood. So making sure that we treat those guys in our stomach really good, help them to help us feel good. And then from there, what can we do outside of ourselves to say, how can I help the planet? What movement can I join? What voice can I put out there to help the planet?
Definitely. Absolutely. So, I'm all for being selfish, and I don't mean that negatively, being selfish, thinking of ourselves, putting that oxygen mask on, as you said. So, doing what you need to do to stay charged up, And for me, simple choices, like even if you can't go 100% organic, I don't, not everything that I put in my body is organically produced or biodynamic, but if you can just start, with making small changes, look, you can find on the internet lists of vegetables that are most laden with pesticides and herbicides. So find the ones, the ones that are sprayed the most. Soft fruit comes to mind. So strawberries are usually sprayed with a lot of pesticides. So buy organic, or just don't want to buy them all year round. Just buy them when you can go and pick them from a nearby farm that maybe is growing them in season. I've got one up the road, and it sprays them with the bare minimum of chemicals, rather than supermarkets demand that growers spray their strawberries with I can't remember how many times it is now, but it's a certain number of times with fungicides, whereas independent growers aren't held by those same rules that supermarket growers are. So, educating yourself and making little changes like that is certainly good. Then the other thing is, reducing the amount of chemicals you're exposed to in your home through cleaning products and cosmetics, going for the environmentally friendly ones, or the organic cleaning products. That's going to lower the burden on your body in that way. So, and that creates, we only have to look at the rise in plant-based foods and veganuary to see how quickly manufacturers turn around. So all the biggest meat producers now are making meat-free burgers and those sorts of products. So they are seeing there's a demand and interest, and they're responding very, very quickly. So what else can we as consumers cause the big companies to do?
Yeah. Have you heard about the worm burgers?
No. What's a worm burger?
Well, because worms don't give off as much CO2, they're farming worms, and they make a burger out of it. It was on one of the BBC programs. I can't remember the name of that program. It's like a news documentary program that runs on BBC Panorama, I think.
Okay.
Panorama. Wow. Did something about the ecosystem, and they tracked this one family to see their footprint and how their food was contributing to the carbon footprint, and how their travel was contributing. So food and travel are the biggest contributors to the CO2 footprint.
Yeah. Tasty worm burger for New Year's Day. I might check that out.
Yeah.
Can you get worm spaghetti as well?
I wonder. No, I don't know. But again, it's also, there's a lot of good ideas out there, but not always very accessible to the everyday person. And that's part of the challenge. Like, I want to buy locally or produced vegetables in my village, but I have to make the effort to go and get it. So it does require some effort on our part to play our part in helping our planet.
Yeah. And that's why conversations like this are good, because sometimes if the more people who are into it, then you can bulk buy together. One person, you can take it in turns to go and seek that out, or order. Some farms may not want to have a minimum order. If they're going to deliver a box of something to you, then there may be quite a highly priced minimum order. But if you can find other people who are interested and then team up, that's always a good way forward. But I absolutely agree. It is crazy, because you and I, we both live near some of the most fertile soils in England, the fens, but it's hard to get stuff grown in the fens, and often it's been, carrots are picked in the fens, grown in the fens, picked in the fens, but they're shipped up to or transported up to Scotland to be sorted and washed, then transported back down to the Midlands to be packed, and then stored in a warehouse somewhere else before they come back to the nearest supermarket. So it's a funny old system. But if you can cut out all those middlemen and find a local producer, and there's schemes like Farm Drop, and there's a good website called Big Barn. You can check out Big Barn. It's a guy in Cambridgeshire who set that up. It's a national website, and that lists all the independent farm shops and growers. Not all of them, but a lot of them. So so
there's
there
also the idea, which I wanted to mention in one of our previous episodes, about a village, or it was more of a town, not a village, in the UK that had a scheme to build little vegetable patches around the town, and they growing these vegetables there, and people can just take vegetables when they want. And I think schemes like that should start to increase, because that's going to help. You imagine they call it agroecology, which used to be called where you have forests of vegetables.
Yep.
Permaculture.
Permaculture and forest gardening. Forests.
And if that can increase, and I think if we can produce more an abundance of food in natural ways, I don't think that there would be a need for anyone to go starving, and eating in a more natural way would be really beneficial for us.
Absolutely, and there's examples of when around the world where people are doing that. And as you said, I think it's one that I've heard of, Incredible Edible. Was that the one in?
That's the one, yeah.
And then in Cuba, what happened there when they had the embargo on sugar exports, I think it was. They had to start growing stuff themselves because they were basically cut off from trading with America, I think it was. And so they had to start. The government said just any government land, public were allowed to use it as long as they were using it for growing food. And that really, the health of people went up massively, and they got on with it. And so
really good.
I think things have changed. So where there's a will, there's a way. So great to hear you thinking along the same lines.
Yeah, and it's we sadly coming to the end of our 6-week series, Get Healthy, but I think there's so much to learn for our listeners. If you haven't listened to the other episodes from 1 to 5, go ahead and find it on LifeShot Health and Wellness. And also, just to shout out again to the book Restoring Balance, which you'll find in the description of the podcast. Also in the previous podcast, you'll find the description. And it's a link to buy the book, where you can learn a whole lot about your health, the health of our environment, and how we can make it better, feel better, and get to that natural state of easy health in a way that we're taking control, right, Ian? And it's about us saying, you know what, it's not up to the big corporates to, I'm not going to take all these vitamins and buy this food and do this and do that. It's about what can I do internally through my choices to help myself to feel better, and with the support of others who know what they're doing, perhaps we can help many people get to that state where they're feeling better, they're able to age well, and to live without aches and pains and inflammation, which we spoke about as well. Would be really good. And also the raising awareness of earthing as well. So I've got myself an earthing mat, which I'm standing on now, and just getting people out there also connected more in nature is really beneficial. There's so much to this whole health thing, so we could speak for ages and ages.
We could, and hopefully we will speak some more next year.
2020 is just around the corner.
It is.
So Ian, is there any final parting wisdom or advice that you want to give based on what we've been discussing?
I just think for all the listeners and for both of us, just stick with it. And for me, part of the intention for 2020 for me is about continuity and staying with the things that I know are right for me, and staying on that track. So consistency, in exercise, it's consistency over intensity sometimes. So not worrying about going at things full throttle, but going at things consistently. So
so I'd add to that and say that you don't always have to do massive steps to make change. You just have to make small incremental steps that will really help to change and shift that big goal that you have. So just make those small incremental steps, and that'll get you to your goal in much quicker than looking at the entire thing and saying, oh my word, how am I going to accomplish this? Take it one step at a time. And also you reach out to Ian as a health coach, and myself if your listeners out there need some guidance.
Wonderful. Thanks, Clint, and wishing you a good start for 2020 and all the listeners as well.
All right, great. Thanks, Ian. It's been really great, and all the best for the new year.
Cheers. Thank you very much.
Thank you.